Hello everyone, it's Zeus here. Welcome back to the Zeus Developer channel. Today we're doing a continuation of the last video where we Dockerized or containerized a simple Express app that worked with a database, right? We saw how we wrote the Docker file, built it, ran ran a Postgres container, and we got the two containers to talk to each other to be able to create user records and then get user records. But all of that is too much manual work. So today we're using a Docker file, a Docker compose file rather, to be able to do all of that we did, right? We'll run the build, and all the setup will be done automatically. All right. At the end of the video, what we want to achieve is that if you're able to if you pull this repo, let's say on GitHub, you should be able to just run your Docker Compose, and you'll be able to access the API. Although there is one manual process as well. You should be able to get into the Postgres container, the database container, and create your user table before it should work. But of course, in a production environment, all of that would happen in a migration file, right? So let's get started. I've opened the directory, the project directory here, right? Look at the files here. Remember, this is where we stopped the last time. So we're going to quickly create a Docker compose file, right? So we say docker compose.yml, and then at the very top we have our version, and then I like to space things out. Let's write the services. The first service we have, it's the backend service. We're calling the backend, right? Second service will be DB, right? So let's get here first. Let's space this. What do we have here? For the backend service, we're building, right? So we're going to say build, and it's going to take the Docker file on this directory where this compose file will be running, right? And then of course the name of the Docker file is Dockerfile, so we don't need to set anything there. All right, so what else do we need here? We need to bring in environment variables. We're going to pull in the environment variable file, right? So .env, right? Let me finish, I'll show you the .env. And then what else do we need to do? We're going to tell this to wait for the Postgres container to run, right, before this one, right? So we're going to write depends on, right? So it's going to be depending on the DB. We've already given it a name, so whatever we give it here is what we're going to use to reference it. All right. We're going to set port, right? Remember when we ran the docker run command, we set with the port. Alright, so we're going to say ports, and we're going to, so instead of doing something like this, right? So this is where the application will be running. All right, so you're saying your application is running here, and you want to be able to access it, right, from on this port, right? But we want all of this to come from the environment variable, right? So all of this should come from the environment variable. We're going to say port, because really we have a variable called port, so meaning they're going to be the same, meaning where the container is running, right, it's where we're going to be able to access it. Next, let's write the DB service. For the DB, we're using a Postgres image. We're not building anything here, so we're just calling Postgres image here. Again, pulling the environment variable here. But now here's the thing, somebody will be asking, why am I doing the same thing in the both services? Why can't you just put it at the top and be able to access them? And That would be wrong, right? Because if you do that, putting this environment variable at the top here would only make those variables available to compose CLI, right? And not the services. When we do this, the service itself will have this environment variable set in its environment, all right? If we put it here, that won't be the case. It will be available, to compose CLI. To run that Postgres image or container, you need to set at least one environment variable called, this is what Postgres container requires, right? This one is not for us. Tell it to take it from our environment variables. We have a variable called db password, right? So this value is going to be coming from this environment variables that will be set, right? So now let's look at this file again. We're using it here as well, and then we're referencing it. So all of this, guys, are available inside this file and many others. So let's look at the environment variable. Right, so this is the port. So the container will run in this port, and we'll be able to access it on this port as well. We're setting db user. These are the credentials we're setting, so that because when we run the Postgres container, all right, this will be the values, right? This will be the values. So we're giving its values, we're setting its values so that the backend system will use the same values to be able to access that database. Now for username, automatically that container will use Postgres as a user. The host now is going to be DB. It's the name of the service, right? Why do we put DB here? Usually you will see localhost, but in this case now, we're using DB because that's the name of this service. So the backend will use DB as the host to reach the database, right? And the name, all of this is the Postgres container that is setting all these default values, right? And then we're declaring it here so that the database, the backend system will use these values. So let's go to our terminal and run it. If we come here, I'm already in that directory here, so I could just do a ls to see the files. Look at the file we just wrote here, right? So what do? We just run docker compose. So we'll say docker compose up dash build, because there's something to build there, right? All right, I guess we're in business. So everything is running here. We're going to open a new terminal tab or window. I'll just do a Control T here. Need to increase this as much as possible. All right, so let's do docker ps to see what we have running as containers. So we have what now? I have to reduce it for you to understand, and then I'll increase it back. Okay, so we have 4 containers, right? Don't worry, the last two are my other containers, but you see this 29 and 30 seconds, right? These are the 2 containers. You see them, the image, this is the Postgres image, and this is a express containerized backend, right? These are their IDs. Let me increase this now. All right, so we have our 2 containers running, so we should be good to go. So the next thing we're going to do now is to get into that Postgres container and create the users table, all right, because the backend is expecting a users table. All right, how do we do that? Of course, we copy this container ID, right? Should I increase this some more? Container ID, and then we run a docker exec, right? IT, we paste the ID here, and then we still want to run shell. All right, so we're inside. I made a mistake. We're inside the backend API container. We're supposed to be in the Postgres container, right? So we'll type exit here to get out of here. Then we'll copy this guy, and then we'll do docker exec IT. We'll paste this sh. we're in the Postgres container now. Now we need to use a PSQL to run SQL command and create a table, right? So how do we get into the DB? We say PSQL. Say user is, remember this came by default by the container, and in database it's created by default. It's also called Postgres, right? So this should get us access to the Postgres database. All right. So we're in the Postgres database now, right? We don't have any tables yet. So let's quickly create a table. I'll grab my create table SQL command and run it just here. I saying this, we're creating a users table. That is, the fields or columns are ID, name, email, created at, updated at. Let's just press enter to run this. We have our table now. If we go back and run that \d, you'll see that we have our users table now. It's empty at first, right? If we do the select everything from users, you'll see that we have 0 record. Look at the table, but we have no record now. So our table is created. We can now access the IP. Remember, it's our backend is available on what? On the port 5001. So let's try to access it. We have remember, we have 3 endpoints. We have a get status, get users, and post users. So let's open a browser and 5001 localhost. So as you can see, our status is good. Let's do the users. Let's try to get users. Awesome. So we got an empty array, meaning the table is there but there is no record, right? Of course you saw that in the container as well, right? So let's use an API tool to create a new user record, and then we'll come back here and refresh and see if we can find that record, right? So I have my API tool here. I would I'll do a post request to the endpoint. Let me just copy this, right? Localhost 5001/users, that's the endpoint. We're making a post request. We're going to send a body, like a payload, all right? A JSON payload, and just two objects. So the first is name, all right? Let's say Jane, and email. So Jane at what? So name and email, that's all we need. So we'll make this post request to our backend, see what we get. Correct. So our record was created. If we come back here and refresh, we should be able to see that record now in this array. So let's just refresh here, and voila, we have our record: ID, name, email, created at, updated at. If we go back to our Postgres table and run that SQL select again, you'll see that we should have our record here. So basically that's it. The most important thing here was this Dockerfile. All right, it's Docker Compose file rather. It's a simple look at just 2 services. All right. So what happened here was Docker Compose automatically created a network and put these 2 services in the same network, and that's how I was able to access reach this backend container, all right, by its name, right, from this place here. Understand this setup. This is important. Now you must not use this environment file, all right, environment variable file. You can create all the environment variables if you want, like this. You can create them out here, right? But just know that this backend service is going to need all of these guys here, right? So if you don't want to use a file, you can come here and just create them here, just like we did here. and then you probably won't be able to, you won't have a file to access, so you type the value out here, right? And then you won't need to do this anymore, right? Because you're not calling the file, right? So guys, that's basically it. I hope you learned something. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.